Oh,
Good morning. How's everybody doing?
Morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. So today I would love to get a picture because this is our final training of your gorgeous faces today on this Thursday. It feels like a Friday, y'all. So y'all feel free to put your cameras on really quick, and we're gonna give a quick wave. Once we get on here, let me get my picture ready. Not quiet. I'm gonna say 1, 2, 3, cheese. Kind of do it some old school way. Y'all remember cheese?
Yeah.
Very good, very good. Those of you that have cameras are turning them on. And how many of y'all, just wave at me, how many of y'all were in our Tuesday session? Yay. Okay, good. Okay, so I think I've got everybody that's wanting to turn their cameras on. So, all right, 1, 2, 3. Well, I'm looking crazy. Hold on, one more time. 1, 2, 3, cheese. Got it. Thank y'all. Appreciate it. Welcome. Woohoo. So y'all are in for a treat today. This is such a cool part of our training. This is Disability 102, and I'm going to share my screen again really quick. And let me pull that up so I can go over our agenda today. So y'all should be seeing an inclusion through digital accessibility on the screen. Am I good? Okay, thank you. I appreciate that, Sonia. You're in my top box there, so thanks for that nod. I appreciate that. Sonia with a pretty smile. Okay, great. So y'all went through this on Tuesday, Disability 101. So all the disability etiquette and simulation, inclusive language and interviewing, all that good stuff. And by the way, we want to make sure we're recording. Stephanie, are we recording yet? I'll give her a second. We are recording. Okay, good. And we have live captions, and I'm going to have Luann talk about that in just a second. So we are going to be learning about Disability 102 today, where we are going to learn how to make PDFs accessible, and we're going to learn about WCAG compliance. Uh-oh, did I hear a cough there? Do we need, we everybody good? Okay. I'm just kidding. Yeah, we want to have as much fun today as possible.
I have a quick question.
Please.
Did you swap the order from what you did last week? In other words, I think I did the PDF one last week on Tuesday. Huh?
Well, actually, we did PDF Tuesday of this week, and this is today's agenda, but we have a recording of it. So if you've already watched it and you missed the other one, you'll get a link. So
no. I just didn't want to do the PDF one twice.
Oh, okay.
We did PDF last Thursday. We did the Microsoft Office accessibility on Tuesday.
Yeah.
Okay. I did that. Okay, never mind.
Okay, good. Very good. All right. Well, who was that, by the way?
Doug.
Hey, Doug, thank you for keeping me on my toes at 10:02 in the morning. I really appreciate that. For a second there, I'm like, am I in the wrong day, year? What's going on? So thanks, Doug. But anyway, so we're going to be doing making PDFs accessible, and that is going to go from 10 until 11:30 today. And unlike last time where I didn't let y'all out for lunch at the appropriate time, y'all will be taking a lunch from 11:30 to 1. So don't let me say 11:45 because I cut y'all 15 minutes last time, or the last group. So those of you that are joining us again from last week to get this training again, you'll get that 11:30 to 1 o'clock lunch. Then we're going to come back from 1 and go until 2:30 and talk about WCAG compliance and learn all about the wonderful world of technology. So we do have a chat feature. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen here. Let me find my button. Am I sharing my screen? I'm sorry, y'all. There we go. It finally came up. Okay, it's because we took that picture. We started off kind of kooky, but we're going to get back on track. I want to introduce y'all to Luann really quick. She's going to talk to you about our live captions, and she's going to help you turn that on and figure out how that's going. So these are going to be live captions. Our recording will have captions. For those of you that have hearing loss, it's going to be a lot easier to read as that goes along. So Luann, I will kick that to you so you can give those instructions.
Okay, good morning. Thank you so much. For those of you that would like to use the captions, you can go to the bottom of your screen and there's a bar. When you hover your arrow over it or your cursor, it'll pop up and you'll see closed caption. And you can click on that. At the top, it'll say closed caption, hide subtitle, or put your captions on, which you can have right here on the screen. Then there'll be view full transcript, which a little dialog box comes up and goes to the right of the screen, and it'll have 4 or 5 lines of captioning. And then underneath that, subtitle settings, you can make the subtitles larger or smaller or however you like it. You can just fool around with it. If you don't want the captions on your screen, you think it might be covering the slides, then I have posted a link in the chat box for you. It's a separate site. You can go to it and actually you'll be following real time with me as I write what is being said. And it's a full page. Sometimes that's easier for people to use. So there you go. I hope you have a wonderful training.
Good. And I can't move on without saying hi to my friend Lorelei Sanders in the house here. Sorry, I pointed you out, Lorelei, but I had to say hi. Good to see you here today. But anyway, it's great to have y'all back. And with that, I'm going to kick it off to the famous, now famous, nationally famous, Jason Martin. And thank you, Matt and Lillian, for putting this together, because now Jason is taking his training on the road nationally. And I want to mention this too. There's a lot of things about Alabama that we're good at. And one of those is Alabama football, roll tide. But the other thing that we're good at, y'all can drop me an emoji about that. That's fine. One of the things that we're really good about is disability inclusion in Alabama. And not to brag, but, you know, disability inclusion in our efforts here, I have gone national. And so we're really proud of that. And you are hearing one of the latest brand new trainings that's out there. So congratulations to y'all for making this a part of your day. And the chat feature, Stephanie Johnson, direct message her if you want to ask a question. Jason will be asking if you guys have any questions throughout. So y'all feel free to message me or her throughout. So anyway, off to you, Jason.
All right. Good morning, everybody. And I'm good. I always hate Zoom because you have to ask that question. Can you hear me?
You're good.
All right, cool. Well, good morning, you guys. Anna, thank you for that luxurious introduction. I'm blushing if you guys can't tell through my monitor. And War Eagle, by the way, for the other half of the community, the preferred Auburn community, in my opinion. So I'm Jason Martin. I'm the Assistive Technology Specialist for the Blind here at the Alabama Department of Rehabilitation Services. I always like to get started with a little bit about me. I'm an individual with a disability. I'm blind in one eye, you know, it happens. My parents were blind. My dad's totally blind. My grandparents met at the School for the Blind in the 1940s. And my son had congenital cataract, so he has a visual impairment as well. I am a master's of special education and a certified teacher of the visually impaired. And I'm Alabama's one and only certified assistive technology instructional specialist. Whew, that's a mouthful. All that being said is I work with individuals primarily who are blind or visually impaired to help them get the job done. But kind of keeping that in the back of your mind that, yes, I do work with blind and visually impaired individuals. I work with individuals of all disabilities. When we talk about accessibility, that affects everyone. And as I start through my PowerPoint slides, I'll harp on that a little bit more, but it does go to a wide range of individuals. And, you know, some individuals, you can tell that they have a disability and some you can't. And so, you know, like these practices and these things that we're going to talk about today really go to make your agency better, the community better. And they're just great things to kind of try to follow through with, or, you know, it's a great aspiration for your agency. And Anna mentioned Lorelei Sanders. Hi, Lorelei. I don't think I've ever met you in person, but I know you and I have done some intricate work that I'm going to talk about today regarding, PDF accessibility. I actually have a PDF that I worked on for you guys. And big props to your office and the things you've done. I know as we've worked through the years, you guys have actually gotten a lot better with making these things accessible without my help. So I think that's just testament to what you guys can do and how we've worked together. So as we go through this session today, I always like to add a disclaimer that using Zoom, we're going to be knocking or kind of going back and forth through PowerPoint presentations, through the web. And Zoom is a fickle beast sometimes where, it takes a little bit to transition from one thing through the other. So bear with me. Anna mentioned that I love questions and I hate that we're not live. There's a strange reason behind that. I'm sure you're all aware, but please, 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 as we go through this stuff, I can't stress enough, add a question in the chat. Don't be embarrassed to do that. Anna or Stephanie will read it back to me. I'll ask periodically. I'm just going to give you a disclaimer today as well. This is disability, digital accessibility, really 102. So that means, with Microsoft accessibility, it's the easy part. And I say this is a bit more difficult because it is. It's a little more technical, it's a little more strenuous, but at the end of the day, what I'm going to show you and the resources I'm going to give you will enable you to actually do what we're talking about. And starting out, that is making PDFs accessible. So let me switch over to my PowerPoint presentation. And I'm going to turn my video off because I don't want you to get this awful zoomed image of my face. There we go. Okay. And periodically, I will be checking in with my friend Anna Taylor. Anna, are we good?
We are good.
All right. So again, this is on PDF accessibility. Now, we're talking about, and some of this, if you were in the Microsoft session, you're going to hear it again, but it almost begs repeating, but I'm going to try to not repeat myself to the point of redundancy. Like, what we're talking about is 508 compliance. So 508 standards, the definition's written here, but Section 508 of the Rehabilitation Act basically says that documentations, employees' work settings, or what they like to call ICT, so information and communication technology, needs to be accessible. And so this is a federal standard. It affects federal agencies, and it's a standard of accessibility. And so what I like about this is at times you will get information from maybe consumers or people out in the field, and you might hear this is not accessible. And then the agency or staff has this question of, well, how do I make something accessible? What do I do? And what I always like to go back on is this 508 compliance. If you're making your documents according to these standards, you are accommodating essentially every disability that you possibly can. You are doing your due diligence as an agency to make sure that your resources and the things you're putting out are accessible and to a broad range of individuals. So if 508 compliance is a federal standard, why would I be recommending this for a state agency? So again, it's a great standard. Just to say, I know my documents meet this standard, so I know they're going to be accessible to a general audience. As I mentioned earlier, I've worked with Lorelei Sanders on submitting and working on your annual report. So this annual report, it goes off to a federal agency. Anything that you submit to a federal agency must be compliant or it will be kicked back. And something as important as an annual report, you don't want that to happen. And I mean, even with my breadth of knowledge of this subject, we've worked on things with the federal agencies and we've submitted it, and then they come back and they go, hey, you've got one or two things still left to fix. that's good. If that's the relationship that you can have with the federal government, that's great. If you aren't in compliance with any of it, though, that looks poor on your agency. So having one or two things you might need to correct is great. Having 100 things, or basically getting a failure on all of your documents, that does not look so hot on you. So that is one great reason why these standards are important. Another one is it integrates the best practices for files. When you build your documents to be accessible to start out with, when you're doing that Word document, or you're doing your PowerPoint and you're following these accessibility guidelines, when you create a PDF from an accessible Word document, guess what? That PDF is a lot easier to make accessible. And it just makes your documents, if you're doing it wrong, per se, if you scan in PDFs and it's just a picture, well, you can't search that PDF if you needed to find something in it. So these standards help you and your agency make documents better for everybody. Another key thing to remember is you avoid potentially damaging lawsuits. And what I didn't put here is bad PR. One thing agencies don't want to do is have a PR storm where somebody is out there and vocally complaining about your agency or putting bad press on your agency because you're not accessible to them. It's just great to avoid that. Very few lawsuits make it in a large amount of money, but some can, because it is, if you're not accommodating individuals of all abilities and disabilities, then you are in fact discriminating against them, and they might have grounds to maybe not financially sue you, but possibly make your agency look bad. And I believe we all kind of want to avoid that. And it makes documents easier for all employees. That's kind of in a way what I was mentioning with integrating the best practices for files. It makes your document creation easier for you if you, and I apologize for my absolutely squeaky chair. If you are using some of the things that we talked about in the Microsoft Office session, like putting headings in place, you can very easily make a table of contents. So it's easier for everybody to navigate. And really, this creates the best practice to develop a culture of inclusion for all, meaning that because even in virtue of being here in this training, this is the start of it. But because you're here, you're interested in creating that culture of inclusion to make sure that your agency looks the best and that you're being considerate of individuals with different needs. So we're talking about PDFs, and that is portable document format. So I missed this gap the last time I gave this session, and I was like, man, I really wanted, that's an opportunity to ask everybody, well, what does PDF stand for? Because we know what it is, but do we really? So PDFs are portable. They are, if you were to send somebody a complete PowerPoint, and I'm sure many of you out there have tried to send something through your state agency email, and you've gotten this lovely message that says, file limit has exceeded. Please use a different method of attaching this file. So PDFs are a way that you could send 130 pages to somebody, but keep a very, very nice and neat file, a very small file, and it's really easy to send. PDFs are universally compatible. So meaning, if you think about, for those of you who've used computers for a while, using Microsoft Word, say 1995 or 2003, if somebody was doing a Microsoft Word, a Word 95 or 96 file, and sending that to you today, your computer would have trouble opening it. PDFs don't have that problem. It makes them great. If I send you a PDF and you have Adobe's PDF reader, it's going to read it. No matter which version I've really created that PDF on, it saves it similarly to a picture with a lot more detail inside of it. So it's an easier way if you're sending things out to the public or you're sending things to a different agency, that you don't have to worry about what version of Word they have. You know that it's going to work. And that ties into the next bullet, which is reliability. you know that a PDF, again, is going to work. It's a fairly easy process. You send it out, it's going to look the same. The fonts that you put in there are going to be the same when someone else opens that up. The ease of creation, PDFs are fairly easy to make. A lot of programs like Word or Excel, or even some of the flyer drafting programs that you see, they automatically know that people are going to be using PDFs. It's a widely accepted file format. So it's fairly easy to create all of these things. PDFs can be secure. You can add encryption, password protection, authoring changes, who's accessed the document. There's a lot of security features that PDFs offer. I mentioned file size reduction with portability. They're smaller. They're not these big giant files. And version independence. Again, you don't have to, like if I'm working with the newest version of Adobe's Acrobat program, someone else can open it. So there are some different software versions. And when we talk about this, more often than not, pretty much every individual in the agency has a version of Adobe Reader. And so it's essentially only allows a user to view or fill out a file. It opens it up, you can look at it, and that's about all you can do. But there are two other versions that you need to be aware of. So there's Adobe Pro DC and Adobe Pro 2020. Now, the difference between DC and 2020 is DC is direct cloud, meaning that some of the documents that you create are going to be stored in Adobe's cloud service. Typically in state agencies, we don't really like that option, or it's disabled, because we don't want our state agency information being stored on a company server that we don't control. So more often than not, if I were to recommend this program, I recommend Adobe Pro 2020. Just because it installs on the computer, the files are on the computer, and they're not being shared outside of your agency. So I mentioned Adobe Pro up at the top, but there is a version, there are two paid versions of Adobe in particular. There's Acrobat Standard. So it lets you create and edit and export files and runs you about $300. But there's an issue with that program. It does not give you the tools that you need to make PDFs accessible. Now, let me pause here for a second. When I talk about PDF accessibility, I don't believe that every employee in your agency needs to have Acrobat Pro. I don't think they need to have the responsibility of making PDFs accessible. It's a somewhat, it can be a lengthy process, and it's a specialized process. So if you have someone in your department or in your agency in particular that is really computer savvy, they're good at documents, they're good at reading manuals, they seem like the right fit, and you guys know the type of people I'm talking about. Those are the folks that you want to kind of work towards getting this as maybe one of their duties. It's not easy. And what I mean, it's tedious. It's fairly simple to do. And I say that in terms of a tech person, it's a simple process, but it's time consuming. So that's why I'm saying it's not quite easy. This is a job. You can't give someone a PDF and say, make this accessible by in an hour. Sometimes it can take a day or two to really get it right. And that's what you want. So also the software to make this fully accessible or make PDFs accessible is kind of pricey. It runs about $449. Now there is an educator discount. Stephanie Johnson told me about this the other day. There's a teacher and educator discount. Stephanie, do you remember the price of that?
Best Buy had it for $119.
See, that's really good. But I believe you would have to have like a student or an email address. I have not looked at the state agency softwares, like who we have on contract that provides this, to see what our actual state agency rate of this is. That can go either way. You know, sometimes ordering through our contracts, you can get a little bit of a discount. And sometimes ordering through contracts, it's a little more expensive for the same thing. So that's one of the reasons why you would want to designate someone in your agency or a group of people to be able to do this. I say a group of people because it makes it a whole lot easier when multiple people know how to do this. So with Adobe Acrobat Pro, you can compare two versions of the PDF and review all the differences. So say you've got purchase order form 2018 and purchase order form 2019. Well, Adobe will let you pull up both of those files and it'll tell you immediately what the differences between the two files are. You can turn scanned documents into editable, searchable PDFs. That is an awesome, awesome feature. Essentially, it takes a picture, and I'm not sure if your agency is similar to mine, but you have these ScanSnap scanners or something like that at your desk, and you pop a piece of paper in and you scan it. If IT has set up your devices properly, they should be doing OCR, meaning optical character recognition. That's a real fancy term to say that it scans the documents, it identifies the lettering on it as text, and it makes it to where you can search through it. And that, I mean, it saves so much time to be able to do that. You can redact to permanently remove sensitive information in PDFs. So for HR departments, if you've got something that needs to go to a supervisor or it needs to go to someone of importance in the agency, but say they don't need every bit of information that might be in that person's file, say there's medical information they don't need to be privy to, you can redact that. And if you can think about any like government conspiracy movie you've ever seen, or you can just think of that as black lines going across the piece of paper where it takes out the content you don't want someone to see. And it will validate and fix PDFs for ISO and accessibility standards. So that's really the big ticket here for us, is that Adobe Acrobat Pro is going to allow you to do a lot of features that will help you make documents accessible. So all these things kind of combine, all the things above it, maybe not redacting so much, but comparing two versions and turning scanned documents into editable, searchable PDFs, all stacked together and help you figure out like, or help you achieve these accessibility standards. One question, and I really did love this question from the first, one of our first sessions, and it bears repeating as we start talking about this today. The question was, where should we start first? Should we start working on documents that go outside to the public? Should we start working on our own inside documents? How do you do this? And Anna had a great phrase the other day. It's like, how do you eat an elephant? Well, you do it one bite at a time. And so you're not going to be able to go, all right, tomorrow our agency is going to make every PDF accessible. That's not feasible. And I don't think anybody expects you to do that. But you do want to start enabling these best practices as soon as you can and in the best way possible. So meaning if you've got something that's going to go out on the web, or if you're got something that's going to the feds, of course, you want to make those things accessible. So really anything that's going out to the public, that's where you need to place your emphasis on first. There's a caveat to that. Unless you have a population of individuals with disabilities within your agency that need accessible file formats. I promise you, our agency at times has, prior to me joining our ranks, would send out PDFs to our staff and they weren't accessible. They'd pop up, and to a blind or visually impaired person, a PDF that's not made accessible comes up as one word, and that's blank, blank, blank. That's all it will say. So you can have a whole 100-page document, and if it hasn't been done properly, it comes up as blank, blank. So that is in starting these standards and starting to implement these standards, that's kind of your order of operations. It's great to do it all at once. That would be fantastic, but that's not really logical. Things that go on your website need to have this done to it. Things that are going out in the public, again, they need to have these standards implemented because, again, it's the front face of your agency. And I'm going to minimize this because it popped up. So in our previous sessions through Microsoft Office, I rely heavily on this website called section508.gov, and it's excellent. It has checklist for Word, PowerPoint, Excel spreadsheets, and PDFs. So if you can read a manual and a step-by-step manual and follow along, you can do this. I've got to reiterate, I'm not a computer programmer. I'm not a computer scientist. I'm a special education teacher that just happens to have a specialty with visual impairment. So this has been a skill I've learned over time. And it seems, again, like an elephant at first, but when you start working on it and you go through these manuals 1 or 2 times, you really start to get a feel for how to make these things accessible, and it comes up a lot easier. So some software to consider at first. Actually, let me switch over. I want to give you a look at section508.gov. There we go. All right. So I've already pulled this up, but I like to start at create just to give you guys an example of how this is your main homepage. And actually, let's go to the main website, section508.gov. It's going to pop up to this web page, and you've got quite a few things up here at the top. But what we're really focusing on today is create accessible products. And so when you go into that, you've got all of these things. And if you were in the Microsoft session, you understand that like documents, spreadsheets, it's even got a thing on, and this really isn't something that we're dealing with today, but how to conduct an inclusive meeting, which I really enjoy, actually. I think that's a great thing to have. But what we're focusing on is PDFs. And so in this, you've got all of these great resources just kind of built into it. There's a test process, there's a detailed checklist, there's a printable checklist that I'm going to show you, and the testing and remediation guide. So essentially, and we're going to skip around again, but and we're going to come back to this, but say, Jason, you're just too much today. It's a Thursday. I'm thinking about the weekend. It's a little bit much today. Well, if you want to come back and take this in bite-sized chunks and hear it from the source, you can. Like it's a 4-module set. I think it runs about an hour, pretty much tops. And I'll say this, like when we show this video, their voice is rather soothing, so it might put you to sleep. But it's really great info, and they're really well done videos. And so for everything that we've talked about with Microsoft Office and Word, you've got these great video tutorials here. So when you leave me, and this happens a lot as a teacher, when my students leave, they tend to forget immediately. So it's always great to have some type of video resource to be backing you up. So if you're like, wait a minute, I want to make it accessible, but what was he talking about again? This is a great place to start at again. And we'll kind of come back to this. One of the things I want to show you as well that we're going to flick through is our PDF checklist. And let me open it up so Zoom will see it opened. Here we go. And I'm going to get confirmation. Anna, my checklist, I know there's a square box in the center. But you got my checklist here on the screen?
We got it. It's great.
Okay, thank you. So when we talk about doing these PDF checklists, it's the same. Some of the stuff you're going to be like, wow, this is almost exactly like the Word and the PowerPoint presentations. You've got these beautiful checklists that you can go through, and it helps you basically go yes, no, yes. Like some of these first 3 things on the PDF checklist, you're going to be able to go, if it's a single PDF, well, no, it doesn't have any file attachments. All files were tested. So you can say yes, yes, if it is only one PDF. PDF shows Adobe Lifecycle under Documents Property. So no, it probably wasn't made with Lifecycle. So a lot of these things, scripts, the majority of PDFs that you're going to be working with don't have scripts running in them. So it's fairly easy to go through these, meaning that like, if it's a plain PDF, you're going to select yes on most of these things. When I produce a document that's going out to the public, going on a public website, it's worth taking this extra step to not have to do 20 extra steps after the fact. You can do this. I initial where it says yes. I put my lovely JM there and just kind of go on down through it. So we'll come back to this list as we move through how to make these things accessible. And I'll explain some of this imagery or like some of this terminology, like the PDF is tagged. So if all of this seems Greek to you, which it might, there is a wonderful guide that's also on this page. And it's how to create, test, and remediate PDFs for Section 508 conformance. Oh, that sounds just lovely. But moving through it, you can read this and it takes you essentially through every single step you would need to do. So just to recap here real quick, I've given you a checklist, I've given you a manual, and I've given you video tutorials on how to do this. So that's not to say that it's going to work perfect every time. You might have some issues as you go through it, but these are great resources that you can have that will help take you through this process, and it will take you through it step by step by step. It mentions tags, like we said. These are part of tags that go in a PDF document. And tags essentially are when you look at a piece of text on the internet, that's a better way of thinking about it. It has HTML code embedded into it. So they are tagged. So like a paragraph is tagged with a paragraph line of code, or a division element is tagged with a div code. So some of this stuff, you don't actually have to understand verbatim what it does. Just know that there are things in part of the documents called tags. So like if you have a heading that's, for example, right here, heading and paragraph elements, well, that's a heading. That's probably an H1, meaning the title and highest section of a document. And then you can split it through that to paragraphs. This would be a paragraph. These are things that are going on behind the scenes of a document that you may not be aware of. Labels in documents. So all of this is built into it. Tables. Again, if you were in the office session, this builds on those concepts. If you built a table in Microsoft Office using the Office features, then it's going to read properly in a PDF and it's going to tag properly as a table. So what I'd like to do is let's switch back real quick to our PowerPoint. We'll give you an idea of some of the things that we need to, like some of the programs that you would work with doing, working with PDFs. So for my people testing it, some software to consider. There's a JAWS for Windows demo, and I tried showing JAWS reading a PDF, and it was a total mess over Zoom. It didn't work right. But JAWS, for those of you who are interested, it's Job Access with Speech is what it stands for. There is a demo that you can click on my PowerPoint and go to. I'm going to take you to the website here. And a lot of people I've seen, a lot of state agencies, they'll have a person that does PDFs and they will have them buy a full version of JAWS. JAWS is particularly a screen reading software for those who are blind and some people who are visually impaired. But it essentially allows a blind user to read the screen top to bottom, left to right, navigate through menus. I personally prefer it to test my PDFs, to make sure it's going to read properly, to make sure it's going to, that things are in a logical order. You know, I mentioned in one of our sessions that it's important that when you're creating these documents that they read properly left to right, like you would read normally. And I mentioned Mr. Rogers, for those of you who were fans of his Neighborhood. If you didn't know, just a tad bit of pop culture knowledge, that Mr. Rogers episodes generally worked left to right when he came in, took off his sweater vest, put on his shoes. And the episodes always went left to right because that's the way a person reads. So the same thing needs to be followed really when looking at documents, is that you want to make sure that it's going to read the way we read. And the way to do that is to download, if you're testing it, download a JAWS demo. It'll run for 45 minutes and you don't have to buy the software. After 45 minutes, it'll cut out and then you have to restart your computer and you get 45 minutes again. For most people, if they're testing a PDF to see if it reads, this will work. In that time limit, you'll be fine to do that. I personally like it. Adobe has a feature built into it called Read Out Loud. And I've had people that use that. They're like, yeah, the Read Out Loud reads it. And then I use it with an actual screen reader. And no, it's still not correct. So I highly suggest that people use this to test if it's going to read. Now, does that mean that you have to know the full functions of a screen reader? No, really, you need to know the tab keys and the up and down arrow keys. And if you can tab through it or arrow down through it and it reads, you're pretty good to go. So I'm going to head back over to actually, I'm going to click on a link and bring up the other thing, which is a Windows Color Analyzer. Okay. And so this is a link built into the PDF. We will talk later on more in depth about a program called Accessibility Insights for Windows. It's great, amazing program done by Microsoft to help look at like web content accessibility. But the Color Analyzer, what it really does is, well, here, let me just show you the short video. I've got that planned in there.
This is Workflow.
Yes.
I have a question. With JAWS, is that available also on an Apple computer?
That is a good question. No, but an Apple computer has a speech built into it called VoiceOver. So you can go through the settings menu and enable VoiceOver, and it's just built into it. It's a different type of screen reader made for Macs. It operates a little differently, but it would work the same way. Yes, that's actually a really good question. So I'm going to play through this ad, and I'm sorry I didn't have it preloaded. And Anna, let me know when I cut off my mic and get some sound that you are getting sound through my computer. Okay, I am sharing sound. All right. I'm going to go through this lovely ad.
Meet the design tool from the future, the most powerful visual coding tool, coupled with the most intuitive visual CMS.
Welcome to Accessibility Insights, tools that make it easy for developer teams to find and fix accessibility issues. This video introduces the Color Contrast Analyzer in Accessibility Insights for Windows. You'll learn how to manually verify that text, UI components, and graphics have sufficient contrast against the background. To launch the Color Contrast Analyzer, open Accessibility Insights for Windows, and in the navigation bar, select Contrast. We'll start by testing the contrast of text in a test app called Wildlife Manager. The first step is to identify any text that might have low contrast.
So really quickly, I paused. What she's showing is building an app. Now, this will work for a flyer that you're about to send out to the public. This will work for any PDFs that we're talking about. Sometimes companies get these crazy color layouts where it might be like bright green on a pink background for a Christmas holiday. That'd be a weird color for Christmas, but you might get a green font on a red background for Christmas. This program, Accessibility Insights for Windows, helps you look at those colors to make sure someone with a visual impairment, and I say visual impairment a lot because that's my specialty, but it covers a wide range of disabilities. But this program, while they're talking about an app, it can be used for PDFs or Word documents, or really anything that you're questioning the color of something that goes out. So if your department is in charge of making flyers or making things that really go out to the public to notify them of events, this is something definitely, and it's definitely something that you want to do as you're creating the document, and not like, okay, it's all done, let's take a look at the color analyzer, because at that point you're kind of stuck and you like the way it looks, and it will perturb you a little bit more that you designed this whole thing and it's not right. So I suggest doing this early in the process instead of later. And that's just a good rule of thumb with accessibility in general. So I'll let it play again. And
You don't need to test any text that's part of an inactive component, purely decorative, intended to be hidden from users, or part of a logo or brand name. The Wildlife Manager app has several potential problems with low contrast. We'll test the text in this close button. It's medium blue text on a light blue background. First, turn off Auto Detect. Next, under Color 1, select the foreground color of the text. Select the eyedropper. Use the mouse to hover over the text. Use the arrow keys to nudge the pointer to a specific pixel, and then press the Enter key. Under Color 2, select the text background color. Select the eyedropper and select a pixel. The Color Contrast Analyzer shows that this text fails the contrast requirements for text of any size. Now we'll test the contrast of some UI components. The first step is to identify any UI components whose boundaries or state indicators might be low contrast in any of these states: normal, mouse over, focused, or selected. You won't need to test any UI components that are inactive or that use a browser's default appearance. Let's take a look at the current animals grid. The headers in this grid are interactive UI components. Their boundaries are indicated by a border. The border between the two headers appears to have low contrast in normal state, so that warrants testing. The headers change color on mouse over, so we'll test that same border in mouse over state too. The headers can't be focused or selected, so we don't need to test those states. First, we'll test the border contrast in the normal state. Under Color 1, select a pixel in the border, and under Color 2, select an adjacent pixel. The Color Contrast Analyzer shows that the boundary fails the contrast requirement for UI components. Next, we'll test the border contrast in mouse over state. For that, we'll need to get a screenshot of the component. Launch Snip in Sketch. Under New, select Snip in 3 seconds. Hover your mouse over the first header, wait for the 3 seconds to pass, and then grab a screenshot. Now we'll test the contrast using the screenshot. Again, under Color 1, select a pixel in the border, and under Color 2, select an adjacent pixel. The boundary contrast fails in mouse over state too. Finally, we'll test the contrast of a graphical object in this Excel spreadsheet. Graphics include icons, charts, diagrams, and illustrations. The first step is to identify any graphics that might have low contrast elements. You don't need to test any graphic where a particular presentation is essential and presenting it with sufficient contrast would undermine its meaning. Logos, photos of real-life scenes, illustrations using realistic colors, and screenshots are all exempt from the contrast requirement. And you don't need to test a graphic if it's purely decorative, or if the information conveyed by the graphic is also conveyed through visible text. So we can ignore this owl icon and focus on the pie chart. It's divided into 4 unequal slices, each labeled with a person's name. First, we need to identify the parts that must be visible for the graphic to be understood. In this case, the necessary parts are the slices, because they communicate the proportion associated with each person. We'll test whether each slice has sufficient contrast against the white background. Under Color 1, select a pixel in this yellow slice labeled Sally. Under Color 2, select the white background. The yellow slice fails, and so does the gray and the orange. Only the blue slice passes. That concludes the demo. For more information about Accessibility Insights for Windows, visit accessibilityinsights.io.
so I know that's a very riveting,
Shouldn't the way you chart
so exciting, but the concepts that she deals with there, really the Excel spreadsheet's a good example, a better example of what you're going to use it for. But if there's something, and let me get off of this screen and get back to our PowerPoint. If there's something that she did make a point to say, if it conveys information, And that's a good rule of thumb. A lot of people sometimes will say, well, that's just decoration, but it actually has some pertinent meaning, like our meeting is at 5 o'clock for our Christmas party. Sometimes that will be in a graphic, and you want to make sure that that important information does meet that. Logos, like she said, are exempt because logos, a lot of time and care goes into selecting the colors of a logo. For instance, we use this on our own personal ADRS website, this color analyzer, and ADRS has this, and I meant to find out this information, like what color we call it, but I want to say it's like a sky blue. It's a very, very nice blue. And it was just slightly 2 or 3 colors off from making it accessible. So somebody that's designing that, you can just change the color slightly and it will make it to where the contrast is easy to read and it passes that test. And so you saw in the left-hand pane, she had whatever document she was working with. And in the right-hand pane, it told you when you clicked the eyedropper and moved it over, what colors worked and what colors didn't. And it'll pop up basically that way. So I'd like to get started with going through our checklist by showing you the meat of the matter, and that is, how do we make these PDFs accessible? Where do you begin? Where do you start? So again, I'm going to pull up this PDF checklist just to show you. As I mentioned before we got started, there's a lot of switching in this because it's just different files. But this PDF checklist, when I'm going through this, I need to make sure that certain things are followed. Well, naming is one of the top things. So let's ignore some of this stuff to start out with, but it has a descriptive file name. So what I really want to show you is the website and some of the riveting videos that are on section 508.gov. And this will just give you a taste of how you could go, okay, this is a standard. How do I make my PDF accessible? So the first part of this is going to talk about, testing a PDF for accessibility. And I'm just only going to play this one, but we'll go through it, and it kind of gives you this idea of what these videos are and how riveting their voice is in the video.
Accessible Electronic Document Community of Practice, AED-COP.
You are watching how to test and remediate PDFs for accessibility using Adobe Acrobat DC. This is Module 2, Testing a PDF for Accessibility. This video is one in a series showing how to make a PDF Section 508 conformant. In this module, we will review steps for testing a PDF's accessibility, including how to set up the document's properties, how to manually evaluate accessibility of the document's content, how to use Acrobat's Accessibility Full Check tool, and how to use Adobe's Read Out Loud text-to-speech tool to read the PDF. Before utilizing Acrobat's accessibility check tools, the PDF must be visually verified to identify issues that cannot be detected by the automated testing tool. For example, visually ensuring proper heading level structures were used or verifying that descriptive alternative text was applied to images and objects. Please note, in order to perform the visual checks in Adobe Acrobat, you must be able to view the screen and use a mouse.
So periodically I will pause it just to say, we will go through with, I'll give you step-by-step instructions and examples with actual PDFs that we've worked on after this video. So like visually ensuring proper heading level structures, man, that's a mouthful to even say. But when I show you what we're talking about, it makes a little bit more sense than just seeing something like this. Verifying descriptive alternative text. These are things that a lot of times I think agencies believe that you can hit a button with a PDF and the computer does its thing and it comes out being perfect. And that's just simply not the case. So there are things that a human has to look at to be able to interpret to make these documents accessible.
Additionally, if the PDF contains attachments or is a portfolio, each individual document must be evaluated for accessibility using the correct testing methodology. For guidance on how to test Microsoft Office documents, visit www.section508.gov/refresh-toolkit/test. Now, let's take a look at the PDF's document properties. The PDF's document properties should contain a few key pieces of information, such as a descriptive file name and tags. It should also allow copying content for accessibility and have a specified language. To view the document properties, first, open the PDF and select File, then Properties, then Description. In the title field, verify that a descriptive title appears. Next, navigate to the Initial View tab, and from the Show drop-down box, verify that document title is selected. If the title field is missing a descriptive title and document title is not selected, the PDF is considered not accessible. A descriptive title will need to be added, and the Show field will need to be set to Document Title before the PDF can be considered accessible. While on the Description tab, verify that the tagged PDF option is set to Yes. If the tagged PDF option is set to No, the document is not tagged, and therefore is not accessible. The document will need to be tagged before it can be made accessible. From the Properties window, select the Security tab and verify content copying for accessibility is set to Allowed. If the option is set to Not Allowed, assistive technology will not be able to access the PDF's content, rendering the PDF not accessible. Change the security settings to allow content copying for accessibility. Do this by selecting a different security option from the Security Method drop-down box, or by selecting Change Settings and then set the security settings as needed. If the security method has been set to No Security, then no restrictions for content copying have been applied. Lastly, ensure a primary language is assigned. From the Properties window, select Advanced, then Language, and verify that the proper primary language is assigned to the document. If the language is not set correctly, screen readers will be unable to reliably read the PDF, rendering the PDF not accessible. The correct language will need to be assigned before the document can be considered accessible. If the document contains multiple languages, the language will need to be set as a property of the tag associated with the content that contains a language change before the document can be considered fully accessible. Next, we'll take a look at the contents of a document.
So just real quick, like when you get used to these first standards, and on the checklist, I think it's like 1, 2, or 3. It's after all that stuff I said we'll look back at. But it takes longer to actually watch this video than it does to go change these settings. Like you just have to have done it once or twice to know what they're talking about. When they are talking about a descriptive file name, similarly to the Microsoft Office session, if it's an agenda for our Disability 102 training today, we don't want a name that just says agenda. You want it to say agenda Disability 102 training, just descriptive file names. And again, if you do this and get in the habit of this, it makes finding a document that much easier for everybody, not just individuals with disabilities.
The physical view of the document may contain specially formatted text that may represent heading levels, lists, tables, figures, and form field elements. Having a clear view of the elements that were used to create the document will help you identify what document elements need to be tested for Section 508 conformance. If the content within the PDF appears blurry or contains handwritten information, the document was most likely scanned. Scanned documents may or may not contain actual content. Without actual content, assistive technology will be unable to read or interact with the PDF. To verify that the PDF contains actual content, first, go to Acrobat's View menu and select Show Hide, then Navigation Panes, then Content. Next, expand the content tree by pressing Shift-8. Use the up and down arrow keys to navigate the content pane. As you navigate the content pane, the content of the physical view of the PDF should highlight. If the pages in the PDF do not contain renderable content, the document is not accessible, and optical character recognition, or OCR, will need to be performed. For more guidance, go to Module 4, Converting Scanned Documents into Section 508 Conformant PDFs. After verifying that the PDF contains renderable content, the tag structure tree will need to be examined to ensure all document elements such as headers, paragraphs, list, data tables, figures, and form field elements are associated with the correct tag. Note: all elements in a PDF must be tagged. If the element is not tagged, it will not be accessible by assistive technology such as screen readers. Elements that are tagged as artifacts, otherwise known as decorative images or repetitive content, will not show up in the tag structure tree. However, the tag will be visible in the content pane. Go to Acrobat's View menu and select Show Hide, then Navigation Panes, then Tags. Next, expand the tags tree by pressing Shift-8. Use the up and down arrow keys to navigate the tags tree. As you navigate the tags tree, the content on the physical view of the PDF will highlight. If the tag does not properly represent the element on the physical view, the document is considered not accessible, and the tags will need to be modified. If you are uncertain what type of tag is being used, right-click on the tag and select Properties. The Type field will display the tag's name. To modify the tag, simply select the correct tag type from the list of tags. Next, use the tag structure tree to verify the document's logical reading order. Tags must follow the visible logical layout of the page. Without a proper logical reading order, assistive technology users will find it difficult or impossible to follow the natural flow of the document's content. First, open the Tags pane and expand the tag structure tree. Use the up and down arrow keys to navigate the tag structure tree. As you navigate the tags tree, the content on the physical view of the document will highlight. If the tags are arranged in such a way that they follow the visible logical layout of the page, the document has a logical reading order. If the tags appear to be out of order, the tag structure tree will need to be rearranged before the PDF can be considered accessible. Now we will evaluate the logical tab order. If the PDF contains links or form field elements, such as text boxes or button controls, the PDF must be evaluated for a logical tab order. The tab order must follow the visible logical layout of the page. To evaluate the tab order, first, press the Tab key to navigate the document. Then verify that the keyboard focus follows the visible logical layout of the page. When pressing the Tab key, if the keyboard focus does not follow the visible logical layout of the page, then the document is not accessible, and the tab order will need to be adjusted. Next, we will check the PDF for figure elements. If the PDF includes figure elements that are not decorative, the figures must contain alternative text. Alternative text is descriptive text that describes the purpose of an image. Without alternative text, users that are unable to see the images in the document will not be able to access all the information provided in the document. To verify that useful alternative text was used for images, view figures by navigating to Tools, then Accessibility, then Reading Order, then check Show Tables and Figures. Next, look for text descriptions placed on meaningful images and objects. For images marked by figure, right-click and select Edit Alternate Text. Examine all captions associated with the image for a text description. Examine the surrounding content for text that describes the image and other objects. Next, check that the descriptive text conveys the purpose and/or function of the image or object. For images of text, check that the descriptive text matches the text contained in the image verbatim. If the alternative text descriptions are not correct, the document is not accessible, and the alternative text will need to be corrected. Now, we will look at data tables. If the PDF...
So I'm going to stop there. And again, that guy's voice almost puts me to sleep. It's not that what he's saying isn't pertinent, but it almost comes across as Greek if you don't see a live action example of this. So I want to switch to a couple of PDFs that I have open and kind of give you a step-by-step guide on what he's talking about, at least through these first concepts, because he covered a lot really quickly and he's like, oh, this is just tags. It's easy. You know, it all makes sense, doesn't it? And his voice is, again, so soothing that he convinces you of anything. But while I'm searching for this, I'd like to ask Stephanie or Anna or any of you, if you've got a question at this moment now might be a good time to take a second and see, just kind of test the waters at where we're at.
All right. I'm not seeing any questions yet. There was an earlier question about, can we do this with an Apple computer? But I think that you already answered that, right, Jason?
Yes,
Okay.
you can. And if push comes to shove, you could use that read out loud function that's in there. I don't like it because it's not perfect, but Apple does have that voiceover capability. And kind of more to that, Adobe Acrobat Pro does work on an Apple computer. So yes, you can use that on a Mac. And
I have a quick question, Jason. When
Sure.
testing the PDF for accessibility, what is the average time it takes to go through this process?
and the honest response to that is it depends. If it's a simple form, then you can do that fairly quickly. And what I mean by that is about an hour and a half if you're familiar with it. If you're first starting out with this, it's going to take you a little bit longer. I mean, it is. Just listening to his explanations of stuff, it's like, oh my goodness, like just to rename the file, I can't think of how many times he says, this document is not accessible. And he does it a lot. So I would say, if it's just a basic form, it can take you about an hour and a half. If it's just like a paragraph of text, like a memo, like one of the governor's memos, that's a good example. That document wouldn't take but maybe 30 minutes to do. If it's a form that has a bunch of fillable areas, that can take anywhere from an hour and a half to 2 to 3 hours. If it's a full annual report, and again, I mentioned some of the stuff from Lorelei, if it's got about 127 pages at times, that can take days. So it really just depends. If it's like a decorative flyer, again, that could be an hour and a half to, if it's really intricate, it could take 3 hours. Like it's detailed in how you have to do it. But again, like if the person is comfortable doing it and they've gotten practice, they can gauge it. Like I'll have somebody send me a document and they'll go, hey, what's it going to take to do this? And if you've done it after a while, it's like, that's 15 minutes, that's 30 minutes, or, oh no, that you shrink back in horror and go, no, that could be about a week's worth of work. So does that kind of answer it, Steph?
Yes, thank you.
Oh, no problem. So I'm pulling up my PDF here, and I wanted to give an example of a PDF that is not accessible first. And this is what agencies will see a lot of times. Sorry for my squeaky chair. You can, Anna, Stephanie, you can see my PDF here.
Yes, you are good.
Okay, so one glaring indicator is I click on the center of this and it highlights everything. I cannot select anything in this. I couldn't copy, like request for equipment. What I did is I had my assistant basically scan something and send it to me. This looks like a form, right? It smells like a form, probably tastes like a form, but this is a picture. It's not a form. I can't fill this out. I can't really do much with it. So what he said in that short intro is the text editable? Is it searchable? And the way we would do that is in this document, I would go to enhanced scan. And sorry, I'm right clicking things. Okay. Enhanced scan. And I would go, okay, let's recognize text. And hopefully my computer doesn't explode when I do this, but let's do it in this file. And it's going to give me a couple of different options. That's fine. Recognize text. So it didn't look like it did anything, but it did. Like the computer just does it. So now I can highlight this stuff. The computer has searched through it and it has applied OCR to basically, and that's optical character recognition. It takes a picture and it goes, oh, this is a line of text. This is a line of text. And it allows me to be able to start and go, okay, This is date. This is requested by. It allows the computer to see what needs to be seen here. Like as before, it was an entire blank picture. So if I wanted to create, and I'm going to bring up my tools menu again. And we're going to work with, I'm going to run the accessibility checker just to give you an idea of what it's going to say to me if I didn't do anything to this document and just ran an accessibility check. So before I just do that very quickly, what I did was I go to Tools, and Adobe has all these awesome tools built into it, but by default, you might not have an accessibility checker built in. So you've got this button here at the bottom. You would click, for instance, I don't have the certificates button, and you would have this add option if you don't usually have it. So you can hit the add option, and then it will include accessibility on your toolbar off to the side. So I really do like that function. I suggest, again, if you have it, go ahead and put that button on there by default. So I'm going to click the accessibility tools, and I'm going to do a full check. So it comes up, and I'm a person, I like to save my time. I could go through all these menu options with you. Let me tell you, I don't even worry about them. I just hit full check. And so on my left-hand pane, it's going to come up with an accessibility checker. Well, let's take a look at the first start of it. It tells me everything that's wrong with the document that it can tell. When we've submitted stuff to the feds, I would say, you know, they really like the 508 standards, but if you've got something in your document that fails here, they will, if it fails here, they will ding it automatically. If it passes here, 9 times out of 10, they will pass it even if you did not meet all of the standards that are in the checklist. So really, this is your guidance to tell you, does it work? So it says tag PDF, it failed. He talked about tags quite a bit. Logical reading order. The computer doesn't know how to read this thing. Primary language, that's not something. So let's take a look. If I want to fix that, let's fix it. I right click on it, or I actually just clicked on it and it gave me the option fixed. Okay, the language is English. Well, guess what? That checkbox is done. Title. So this would be Department of Rehabilitation Services Purchasing Section, Request for Equipment, Supplies, and Printing. That would be the full file name. If I wanted to do that, we would go through the steps that he talked about: file, properties, file name. I'm not going to go through all of that because it's pretty much by the book. You go in and you give it that descriptive file name and it's done. But this tagged order is something to keep in mind. So if I was to look up right now, all the tags, there's no tag available. If in my accessibility button, I can auto tag this document. Generally, if I do it, it works fairly well. If I've created the document in Microsoft Office and I did the accessibility functions in Microsoft Office first, it's going to read the tags that Office puts in, and you're not going to have an issue with that. But if I auto tag it, click this button, okay. And I can come back down here and look, and now all of these are tagged features. So it kind of reads that a little bit wrong, but that's okay for right now. We're just kind of looking through to see what paragraphs are here. It sees that that's a table. It's going to make that editable. So it basically, remember, we started out this document where it's one picture. And so this allows somebody, if you see the cursor in the center of the screen that's highlighting, if I'm using a screen reader, I know that it's going to go here to here to here to here and follow along with me. When we are working with a form, and I will show you some that are completed, but I kind of like going through it with you as well. 9 times out of 10, what people will do is they'll come down here to prepare form, and it will have to save a different copy. Sure, that's fine. We'll save it wherever. Yes. And we give it time to process. and boom, it comes up and it sees every form fillable in this area. So what I would have to do with this document is I would make sure that it's reading in the proper order. So over here in the forms page, you have, I like to call it the reading order. Like it's not specifically, but it's like the tab order. When a person is going to hit tab and go through these forms, you want it to do it the right way. And so for instance, with this form, as I'm going down, you've got date that comes up first, ship to agency number, requested by, phone number. But if we notice, it goes phone number and then it bounces back to this document over here. Like, why would it do that? We would not want it to do that specifically. So what we would do is we would move this over or move it up. So ship to agency, we would come right underneath it, just dragging and dropping if it wants to do what I need it to do. And of course, I believe my computer is freezing at the moment. All right. There. And it takes a minute to reorganize the order because it's doing a lot behind the scenes that we don't see. And all right. So now, if I go back up to the top, it's going to hit that date, sub-regency or ship to sub-agency number. And then it's going to go down in the logical order. Then it's going to back up. And that's really what they mean by like viewing the logical reading order. This is what they're talking about. Do I read date, ship to sub-agency number, requested by, and then these other things? Or would I go, okay, logically, this form, I'm going to need these 3 lines beneath it to write in information. Then it's going to go back to maybe phone number, approved by, bill to, agency number, and see it did it again where bill to, I might need to put in the address to that. And so that's going to come before the phone or before the date. So that's a quick example of how you start this process. Now, when you're working with a screen reader, here's the thing that gets tedious. So a file like this, honestly, for me, would take about an hour and a half of dedicated time. It would be a little painstaking because every single one of these areas has to be given a proper name. So we'll start at the top to make it easier. If I double click on this or right click on it, excuse me, and go to properties. So tooltip is date. That works, but this would be, and so that's what it's going to do is the screen reader is going to read the tooltip when somebody highlights over it. And I tried to demonstrate this the last time, but it did not work. It's going to read the tooltip. So if I go to sub-agency number, properties, tooltip, it's going to read the sub-agency number right here at the bottom. But if I get to 1, all that reads is 1. That's not very descriptive. So I would come in here at the bottom, ship to sub agency line 1. And so that tells the person ship to sub agency line 1, line 2, line 3. You would add this in. Up top, this really, it matters, but it doesn't matter as much for accessibility, just as long as these fields don't repeat. They're considered really variables in it, but I'm not going to go kind of in that much detail. But as long as they don't repeat, it's fine. So like what's underneath matters. Phone number. So that number is, it's asking for a phone, and I'm trying to see, so phone and phone down here. Well, which phone number is this form actually asking for? Is it asking for the person that ordered it? So that's something you need to think about when you're constructing these documents. So it does take time, and this is really how one is fillable. Now I'm going to show you a form that has been already made. and has been made accessible in the best way possible. So let's take this form. So are we, just checking with you guys, are we at the OASIS Special Programs for the Blind order form?
You are.
All right. So here I can hit tab. And I say this, and for some reason it's sticking in the PO field. That's odd. Let's find another form because that is a terrible example. There's something wrong with either the file or my tab order here. Okay. Are we at the rehabilitation services form?
Yes, you are.
All right, great. So here's another form that's an example of something that has been made accessible. And there is something going on with my computer as I'm showing you guys this, because this is not typical. I'd probably have to close out of Adobe. But when I hit tab, it should be going through all of these different forms. There's probably something I have loaded up. Let me just close out of Adobe. I might have a bit too many things up and running. And I will share again. So that can happen. And when in doubt, turn it off and turn it back on again. I can probably guarantee it's because I'm working with a document that we were currently working on is the reason why things weren't popping up the way they should. So let's try this again. And so we're coming back to share. There we go. All right. Now, let's hope this does it. Aha, okay. So yeah, it was probably because we were already editing a form. It was being a little weird. Traditionally, you wouldn't do more than one Adobe form at the same time. Like just for the sake of demonstration, I had a bunch of stuff up. But when you've done this stuff right, you should be able, what I'm doing is hitting the tab button. And honestly, the order for this is wrong. As I'm looking back, what I find is funny is as many times as I've looked at some of these files, and some of them might be different versions than what I've done before, I'm noticing errors even I made. It's like, wait a second, this doesn't work in the right order. So I'm looking through this, I'm going through my order, and I can use the arrow keys. So consumer should not come before the second line of this address. And it's labeled here, address line 2. So now this is going to read more better. And it's closing out. It's taking its sweet time because Adobe is just not being nice to me today. Okay, so now if I tab through this, it's going to tab the right way. This makes it easier for individuals with disabilities, but man, all of my employees, they were doing this stuff by hand, right? Like they were ordering information or ordering things by hand and filling this out with pen and paper. So they were going through this, doing it the absolute long way. And so this, I can just hit tab and fill out an order form. When I send it to somebody, my handwriting is terrible. My typing ability is great. It makes it far easier for you to do this and have a nice clean document at the end. And then when you need to print something out or sign something, I generally leave that blank. Some agencies have an electronic signature that you could do. But once I'm done, all I have to do is print it out, sign my name, and it's good to go, and it's a lot cleaner. So I just want to quickly go back. I know that we are getting close to our bell here, and I want to go back here and take a look at this PDF checklist, just to go over some of the things that we haven't touched on today. Alternative text, that is one thing. If you've got pictures in the document, the accessibility checker will find that. And so I've got a logo here at the top, and I doubt I even went through the process of giving that alt text. So I'd go to accessibility, set alternative text. It will detect all figures. Okay, there is no figure. I probably have already labeled this decorative. So that's okay in this term of document. Like, that's not important for the document to know that there's a rehab logo here. If this was a flyer, then it would be a bit more pertinent to know. But let's pull back up our spreadsheet and our checklist and take a look at some of the things that would be required through that. And as I kind of pause and pull this last thing up, do we have any questions lingering, or right now we're getting towards the end? Are there any questions that I can answer as we go kind of towards the end of all this?
No, we've got about 5 minutes left. And so I don't see anything in the chat yet before we go to lunch. If you guys have any questions, y'all be sure to drop those in, because we are going into another session when we come back from lunch.
Okay. So I'm pulling back up the checklist here, and I got the checklist right. Yes.
Sorry about that. Yes, I was on mute.
You're
Yes.
okay. You're okay. So kind of what we just talked about, we showed how you could auto tag a document using these accessibility features here to the side, auto tag. The PDF or image contains scan pages. We talked about that. You would go to enhance scan and click on that and make sure that it's not this one blank image, that it's a scanned, or it has went through an accessibility check in that sense. The PDF has the descriptive file name. We talked about that. The assistive technology access is enabled. The video went over that. That was in the file and properties. Document language is set. When I did that full check of accessibility, it popped up. The tags follow a visual logical reading order of the document. So kind of what I showed you in the form fields, when you're arrowing down through it, and I don't know, this document probably, okay, this document is tagged. When I'm going down through this, you just want to make sure that it is going in a logical order, right? Like it's going the way you would read it. Fairly easy in when you see it worked out. So, because sometimes Adobe will bounce them around. Like, I think, for instance, whatever this is popped up way to the top. So that's an example of it not get, well, it's saying the whole thing is a table, so that actually works. The document has decorative content. If there's an image in the document that isn't important, when you go to set alternative text, you'll click it, and then there's a box that says this is decorative. So if the screen reader will ignore it. Vital information, headers and footers and watermarks is duplicated in text. That's something we went over in the Microsoft Office session, that if it's there in the top part of the document, you need to make sure that it is somewhere in the document, because it's not going to read it. Headings are tagged with a header tag. In this particular document, there are no headers, but if there were, you could do that. So perchance, if you needed to change this title area, and my computer is freezing up just a little bit. If I wanted to change this top paragraph to a title or a heading level 1, I would click on it. We click options up at the top, properties. And so it said it's a paragraph. No, I want that to be a heading level 1. And then close. So if I see that my headings here, this might be a heading level 2. If I don't like how it's set, and I feel like it could be reading better, I could change that. That's basically what that's asking for. Data tables, like you should see things here are identified in a table tag, and they are. Auto tag does a pretty good job of doing that. It's not perfect every time, but it is there. List or tag correctly. So like we said in the office session, if you're building a list with the office features where you follow the 1, 2, 3 that it auto generates, it's going to put a tag in that document. You don't notice it, but it will, and it will tag it properly if that's done. Sections of different languages have corresponding language attribute. The tag will pop that up. But if you had a paragraph that was a different language, you would highlight it the same way I did options and then find the language tag that goes with it. So images, data tables, we went over some of these things. Links and controls, again, if there's a link in the document, you want to make sure that if it says it's a paragraph, you click it, you change it to link. That way the screen reader knows that it's done that. We talked about fillable forms a minute ago. Each form has a tooltip that matches the label of instruction. And then the tab order matches the way the user would go through it. Color and sensory characteristics, we mentioned some of these things. In the office section, we mentioned if it has color there, that we want to make sure that we go in the proper order. Again, that's my time for this session. There's a tremendous amount of resources on that section 508.gov. This presentation has been recorded. So if you want to go back and listen to anything that I've said or went over, it's there for you. And with that, I guess I'm going to take it back to Anna. Thank you.
Awesome, Jason. Thank you so much. I love watching you train. You are such a good teacher and you make it all so easy for us. I really appreciate you. So with that, you guys are ready to come back. We're coming back at 1 o'clock. So make sure you get that lunch in and head back over here. But anyway, y'all enjoy it. We'll see you back at 1 o'clock. Thanks so much.